Hello, welcome to the latest edition of the Warriors Stock Report. Tim Bontemps, ESPN senior writer here. Anthony Slater, ESPN senior writer there in Milwaukee, where Ryan Rollins, former second round pick of the Warriors, with no Giannis Antetokounmpo playing as a late scratch after being probable with knee soreness. Far from the first time, Slater, we have seen a team have a bit of a letdown when a star player gets scratched shortly before tip. But full credit to Ryan Rollins, who's had an incredible couple games in a row, and full credit to the Bucks, who are now 4-1, beating the Knicks and the Warriors in back-to-back games, and Golden State, which have been cruising along and was 4-1, now 4-2. So we haven't talked since the opener when the Warriors won pretty handily in LA against the Lakers. A lot has happened in the interim. So I will leave the floor to you to start with. What is your biggest takeaway and stock up or stock down as we're, 6 games and 9, 10 days into this season?
Stock up for a high school basketball player in the tunnel over there. He just got a couple pictures with Steph Curry. Him and his
Ooh,
family, they were pumped about it, leaving the
I can
arena.
imagine.
Yeah, I believe it was one of Draymond's college teammates' sons, who's like a big time high school basketball player
I'm
around
just
here.
gonna I'm just gonna stop you right there to say that that sort of sums up where we are with the
Yeah.
Warriors, that we
Yes.
have meetings between the sons of college teammates of Warriors core dynasty players
Yeah.
at this point in their
Yeah.
careers. It's
Yes,
a
you're
reminder we're
correct.
getting closer to the end than the beginning, is all I'll say.
Well, tonight was a little reminder of that. They look creaky in Milwaukee, and the Bucks did play well. Fast, free was the word that was used by the Warriors a ton post game. They were impressed, obviously, with Ryan Rollins. You mentioned it, Ryan Rollins, which you remember which trade he was in.
I believe he was a part of the Jordan Poole Chris
He
Paul
was
trade. Am
he
I
was
right?
attached to Jordan Poole at the end, as they were maneuvering around him, trying to free up roster spots. Really, that was, they had to throw him, and Patrick Baldwin Jr. was the other, just throw in into the DC deal for that. But anyway,
One of those guys is toiling obscurity in the G League, and one of them went for 25 and 32 against the Knicks and Warriors this week. You guys can figure out which is which.
and I'm not sure I would have predicted if you told me that one of the two was going to do that when that trade went down. I may have gone with Baldwin Jr. just because of the pedigree going into the draft. He was the first rounder of the two.
And he
Uh,
was a guy that was a huge high school prospect. Rollins,
yeah.
who went to Toledo, was a second round pick, rated really well in the analytics models. He has bounced around a little bit, but he's settled in with the Bucks. He's on a 3-year, $12 million deal that he signed this summer. Looks like it's got a chance to be one of the best bargain deals
Yeah.
in the league. I do a column every year laying out the best team made up of non-max and non-rookie scale contracts in the league. Pretty sure Ryan Rollins making $4 million a year with his skill set is going to fit on it. And yeah, like you said, the Warriors playing against a young, you don't think about the Bucks being young and athletic, but they had a lot of young guys running around, and the Warriors did look a little old, which isn't entirely surprising, having flown across the country for the start of a road trip, but still not an ideal way to
Yeah.
kick off this swing through the Midwest.
I sat down with Kerr at shoot around today in Milwaukee for something else, but the conversation towards the end veered into tonight, and he was scared of this game tonight with Giannis. He was just hoping to, keep it close at half, work off some of the airplane legs, all that. And then apparently, as he told me post game, when he heard Giannis is out, and I mean, it was like 30 minutes prior to tip. I mean, it
Yeah,
was
he
a
was probable all day. He'd been
yeah.
probable the last couple games, and all of a
Yeah, I mean,
sudden he was out. Doc
yeah,
even had said, I believe,
yes.
he expected him to
In
play,
his
and then he was
pregame, he
out.
said, I think he's going to. I mean, it was like, yeah, we'll see. But yes, it was completely expected that he was going to play. And he gets ruled out to the point I'm like telling a couple of the coaches with like 32 on the clock, like, hey, Giannis is out. And it's like, scramble back to the back and change up the game plan. And
And
Steve
that
said,
is that's
yeah,
just a classic NBA regular season loss for Golden State. No, not making excuses. Obviously, they shouldn't have
yeah,
lost the game, but many times have we seen this play out with teams across the league where you see a big time player not play at the last second. The other team has absolutely nothing to lose, and the results are what they are.
Yeah, Steve's quote post game is he said, I think we're 0 and 12 the last few years when teams sit their stars, and he said if he was an opposing coach, he would just sit the star against the Warriors. Well, it's a little excusey. Particularly
Oh, it's
what
it's a bad loss, but it's
yes,
also it's a loss we have seen plenty of times. It's
yes,
a very
yes.
natural letdown game, and the Warriors had a letdown.
But yeah, he mentioned mental and physical fatigue, even though it's early in the season. It's a little bit of a road heavy, condensed schedule. I think 6 and 10 days in 4 different cities, whatever. And they have a 6 game road trip coming up, by the way, which is bad. But the specific schematic thing you mentioned, they tried to switch a lot and didn't do it well. Him and Draymond were very critical of the way they, you know, executed their switching scheme in this game. And, that's I think can be attributed to maybe like some of the slow-footed nature, when they're playing kind of at 80% whatever capacity. Al Horford, stock up, stock down. We could probably say from this particular game, Al Horford stock down. I think he was. I don't know if you have the stats up. He was minus a lot.
Yeah,
Uh,
one of six shooting, 1 of 4 from three, minus 20, game worst in
yeah.
20 minutes. And I actually wanted to get to Al Horford because I think one of the interesting things that's happened over the last week has been some of the starting lineup choices for Steve Kerr, and specifically the last couple games when they've had their complement of guys. They have started Quentin Post and they have had Al Horford come off the bench. And this is something you talked about last week and you talked about during the preseason, which was with Al Horford, as we've talked about a lot, a guy who you expect to really not want to play more than 25 minutes max, especially during the regular season. What is the best way to parse those minutes out? Might be if he's a full-time bench player. I did not really think that would be the case. And it seems like
Steve
10
said it.
days into the season, we're trending that way.
Beyond trending it. So he names Kuminga the fourth starter prior to the previous game, the win over the Clippers, and then post game announces that the fifth starter will be rotating, but it's only rotating between Brandon Pajemski if they're going smaller and Quentin Post if they up bigger. And he said he wants to keep Al Horford as the bench player, so that is the plan. Again, can shift, can change. We know probably will with Steve Kerr, especially if they hit a losing skid. But yeah,
But
Al Horford.
it's what they
Yeah,
should do. You have to manage Horford's minutes. The whole point of having him is to have him ready to go in the spring. And if you play him too many minutes now in search of wins in October and November, he's going to run out of gas in May. I mean, he's one of the oldest players in the league. He's playing in the post. He's scrambling out to the perimeter to try to defend people. That's what you have to do with them. So I think that's been an interesting development. And you mentioned Jonathan Kuminga. Like I was talking to a scout tonight who was asking me, like, well, do we really buy that, Kuminga's starting and being part of the starting lineup and seemingly being a key piece for them, at least right now, or is this just trying to boost his trade value? And I said, well, look, at least from my vantage point, and you've watched the Warriors closer than I have, but I've been paying attention over the last week and a half. It certainly seems like Jonathan Kuminga is doing all the things, as we've been talking about since really he got back with the team, that the Warriors have wanted him to do for the past couple of years. And if he does that and keeps doing that, as you talked about all summer, and as we've talked about as he's gotten off to a good start, there is a real role for him to play on this team. And it seems like so far, I would say shockingly, only because of how nasty at times the summer got, it really seems like he's bought into that role and is performing it pretty well.
he's been their third best player, I'd probably say, through whatever 10
Behind
days of
Jimmy and Steph,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, Draymond obviously still does a lot on the defensive end, but the way Kuminga's scoring, the way he's rebounding, that was the best 5 game rebounding stretch of his career. He worked a lot on his passing this summer. And sometimes I think people just believe playmaking is instinctual or some of like, the quick, shorter, hit ahead passes, DHOs, that type of stuff. But it can be learned. That's a learned skill. I think we're seeing with Kuminga. Like he is making passes he wasn't seeing a couple years ago. And I think you can tell he's like liking passing. And that is, a huge deal for the Warriors. Obviously, to me, the rebounding is a mentality and it's an effort thing. And I've said for years, go look at history. He's had monster rebounding stretches when he is a starter, when he knows he's playing, when Andrew Wiggins has left the team and Steve Kerr has to say, hey, Jonathan Kuminga, you are getting 30 minutes tonight, no matter what mistakes you make. And that is what is happening right now. He's a matured version of himself, a fifth year version. He's a good player. He feels really good about his game right now. He feels like he felt all summer when you would talk to like, him or his people, it would be like despite all the drama, it would always come back to, "Ooh, he looks good right now. Man, he feels good about his game right now. Man, that Minnesota series just trampolined him into his summer." And there was like, I, and obviously it's like you're going to be hyping your guy up, and
Well,
he's going to be hyping himself.
it's
Yeah.
one thing to say that, right? It's another thing to come into the season and back it up. And to his full credit, for the first 6 games of the season, like you said, I think he's pretty clearly been their third best player, and he has done all the things that Steve Kerr has wanted to do. It's not always been perfect. Like tonight, he had 4 assists and 5 turnovers. That's not great, but he's trying to play within the team concept. He's showing effort. He's running the floor. He's hitting the boards. He's moving the ball, and he's delivering some offensive production too. Like this is the kind of player that they need, and they don't really have, as you've repeatedly said, they don't have a guy with his athleticism, his ability to guard on the ball, to do the different, to even be an isolation scorer. They don't necessarily have a guy like that when he's in a good rhythm. So, I certainly think if you told me at the start of October when this whole drama came to a conclusion that we'd be sitting here on early in the morning on Halloween talking about Jonathan Kuminga having the first 6 games that he has had, I would have said that's a pretty stunning turnaround from where this thing looked like it was. And I think his stock is definitely about as high as it's been, I think, at any point that he's been with the franchise, which is hilarious given the complete gong show that the summer was
And
and
he's on a
how it
he's on a
got to
team
this
friendly
place.
deal. He's on a team
He
friendly
really
deal at this
is.
point. I mean,
He really is.
he's outplaying his current contract number, and he has a team option on next season. And we'll see. I mean, it'll be it's very interesting because as you were looking towards this situation in the future, and we can just call it January 15th, right? That's when he's trade eligible. It was always going to be, sure, if he doesn't play well, or if it's just, really kind of angsty behind the scenes, whatever, it might be hard to trade him because his value might not be that high. But then it was like, okay, well, sure, they can showcase him and he can start and he can have these type of performances. But now again, the conversation will shift to where it always has when Kuminga has the hot stretches, which is like, they should they trade him? This is the type of guy they need. Is they're starting, three
Well,
right
and
now.
well, and the other part of it too, Slater, which has sort of been slid under the radar, is there's not a lot of obvious names for the
Yeah.
Warriors to go get him with, right? And that's use him to go get. And that I think is the other side of the coin, which is if they do make a trade with Jonathan Kuminga during the season, who is it for and what does it look like? And I
And
think
does
when
it
you
make them better?
well,
Like,
right. And if you
yeah.
really start to drill down on options around the league, it's not an easy thing to do. It's not like there's 15 guys. Oh man, they all would be awesome fits and are attainable players. Like so, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch as it has been since the moment he signed the contract. And with every game he plays well and he continues to grow into a real big responsible role on the team, it makes what was a fascinating story in the summer because of the hypothetical things you could theoretically turn Kuminga into. Ironically, a story about what he's actually doing on the court, which is really not anything that we were talking about at any point for the
Well,
past.
I will say, like, part of the reason they weren't going to trade him to the Kings for Malik Monk or the Suns
Oh, of
for
course.
Royce O'Neal, and this, but it's
Of
like
course.
they know the talent within, and obviously it's been a roller coaster of a 4 years, but he's
Yep.
flashed at various times. And like, I think beyond just, hey, this was a bad time value wise to trade him this summer. And teams were trying to buy low and they knew that they were just spitting at the buy low opportunities. It was also, it wasn't just like, oh, they can do better than Royce O'Neal. They were sitting there going like, Kuminga, even like an 80% version, like halfway bought in Kuminga, at times can be better. And you're seeing that, but yeah. What do you think of it's still interesting though. So you have this starting lineup that Steve all summer talked about Jimmy, Draymond, and Kuminga as an awkward fit. They were minus 36 last season in limited minutes together, to the point that Kerr had quotes going into the summer about, look, it just doesn't fit. To so much so that was used in negotiations as, hey, the head coach is saying this guy doesn't fit. why, like, how is that an appealing
Why? That's
place
right.
to come back to?
That's right.
Um, and obviously he comes back in. Steve still, even early in camp, was saying, like, I remember it didn't look great in the preseason when they tried it, and he was like, look, the same problem's still there. Opening night, talking to Steve, the first half in LA, he was like, they started it, but Steve didn't love it. And then he says the second half in LA and beyond is when he's finally come into the belief. And of course, he credits a lot of that with Kuminga's growth and evolution. He was forced into it because of the Horford limitations plus the Moses Moody calf. I think if Moses Moody doesn't hurt his calf, Kuminga's not starting.
No,
But
that's again the irony of the situation, right? Last year got derailed by him having the injury, and this season has gotten the jump start it has, I think, in large part by Moses Moody getting hurt.
but I guess my question is, they're still tonight. I think there were some of the more plus lineups was those three together. So they're sitting there probably plus 40 something, and they're going to keep starting that way. Steve's committed to it, but I know they didn't love the spacing tonight. They're shooting outlier percentages from three. Kaminga's hitting three at a good clip. Draymond still is. Jimmy even is. I still do wonder, and I think they still wonder about, playing those three together, and the spacing problems they might have, even though, look, the data is saying it's been really good right now.
Yeah, look, I mean, Draymond came into the game shooting 45 from three, right? Like that's not gonna carry over. I mean, Kuminga went 2 for 4 tonight from three. He on the season before tonight. I mean, he wasn't shooting great from three. I mean, he's right around 34% where he always has been, somewhere in the low to mid 30s. That's not really a huge part of his game. Yeah, look, I think the Warriors have shown, I think, through 6 games to be kind of exactly the team we thought they were going to be. When they're locked in and playing really well, their ceiling is extremely high. It might be the second highest ceiling of any team in the West. You saw them go toe to toe. That Denver game was awesome last week.
Yeah.
Obviously, Aaron Gordon turned into the Human Torch in that game and almost won it by himself for Denver. But you know, Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler together in the playoffs gives you an awfully high ceiling, even when those guys are in their mid to late 30s. They've done it too many times. It's incredibly difficult to guard Steph at this point. Jimmy is nails in pressure situations. But I think they're also going to be prone to be flat a lot during the regular season and
Twice
have
already. They were flat in Portland. That's another game we haven't talked about.
right. So then they have the great game against Denver. I believe that game went to overtime, right?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So then they fly to Portland. They have a back to back in Portland. You knew that was a definition of a schedule loss. They lose that game. They come back and win the back to back with Memphis and the Clippers at home after that, which was good. But yeah, I mean, look, back to backs are going to be a struggle for them all season. Games like this at the start and end of a road trip are probably going to be tough for them all season. Like when you're four of your top 6 or 7 players and probably three of your top 4 or 5 players are 35 and older, this is the downside. And I think it is going to be a bit of a war of attrition. And to your point, like, yes, they're hitting shots right now, but if those guys stop hitting shots or teams get a chance to really like look at this more, adapt to it more, play off these guys, like I'm sure you're going to see them saying, hey, let's dare Jimmy to shoot. Jimmy doesn't really want to shoot unless he has to. Draymond certainly doesn't really want to shoot unless he has to. Kuminga, again, is not a really willing 3-point shooter.
Well, they're starting
Um,
post, really.
right. It's exactly why they're starting him. And, sometimes that's look good and other times it's not going to look good. Like he's a nice bench piece,
Well,
but
let
he's
me
not a
ask
guy you want to
you.
lean on.
Let me ask you what you think of their center spot. Obviously, you have Al for the playoffs, but he's going to end up playing what 35% of the regular season minutes, and then
Probably.
beyond that, you have Draymond at center is obviously always an option, but they're trying to limit that. And then you got the two recent second round picks, Quentin Post, Trace Jackson Davis. Do you think they need long view, deadline, whatever? Like, do you think they need more? I mean, Post had the really nice game against the Clippers, hit some threes, stretched Zubac out. They were really happy with him in that game. But really, other than that, he preseason and the rest of the regular season hasn't done much. Trace is out of the rotation. Like, is that the upgrade spot to you? Or are you just hoping, hey, when it matters, Al will be there and he'll play well?
I mean, I think it just depends. It's kind of a cop out answer. I just think they're still a guy or two short ultimately if they're really going to go toe to toe with the Thunder. And so to me, in these kind of questions, I think you have to look at it through the prism of what do you do when you play Oklahoma City? Because that's the team you have to try to beat, right? And that if you want to get out of the West and you want to win the title, the Thunder are not going anywhere. So, what do you have to do to beat the Thunder? Now, the Warriors, I think, are probably the team best positioned to beat the Thunder in the West because they have Steph Curry has always been the one guy the Thunder have never really had to solve for. He's always given them a ton of trouble, and the way they play, he's always been able to handle it pretty well. And Jimmy Butler is another guy with the way the Thunder, like the Thunder's whole thing is, you know better than anybody, Slater, right? They want to speed you up all the time, especially defensively. Like they want to get you pressure with their pressure. They want to get you thinking too fast and then going a step faster than you want to. And then they jump in, they steal the ball, they run down, they get in transition, juices their offense. Like it gets their whole system going, right? Jimmy is able to withstand that. And they've never really had a great solve for Steph. So, if you go into it saying, okay, we have as good a chance as maybe anybody or anybody this side of Jokic, maybe to really go toe to, and I mean, or maybe the Spurs. I mean, I think the Spurs have a ways to go, but I was sitting here on my couch watching both the Warriors Bucks game and Victor going for, I believe, 27, 18, 6 and 5 to go 5 and 0
By
and
the way,
beat
next
the,
time I would say maybe 2 times from now when we talk, that it's going to be a Warriors baseball series in San Antonio.
yeah, that will be
After
fascinating.
OKC, by the way. It's OKC, San Antonio to open that 6 game trip.
That could be a very interesting 5 days for the Warriors. But look, if you're looking at the Thunder, like you go into that matchup right now, okay, you're going to have Steph out there for a ton of minutes. You're going to have Jimmy out there for a ton of minutes. You're going to have Draymond out there for a ton of minutes. I would say when the Warriors have the chips down in the playoffs, ideally they'll be playing Draymond at center,
For sure.
right? And
Especially in that
so,
matchup.
but
You
I
know,
think in any real matchup,
yeah, I mean, Houston,
I mean, look, Houston is obviously a unique team, but like, let's just say generalities. When the chips are down in the playoffs, what you're probably going to want to do for as much of the 48 minutes as possible is have Draymond and Horford at center. So to me, if I'm Golden State, I'm trying to get another good wing player. That I
this
think
is
is
where
what they need to do.
and we can do a small little newsy aspect of this episode. DeAnthony Melton is a name that, at his best, at his healthiest, is a player who would be in a top 7, top 8 of a rotation
He's
against the Thunder.
he's a
Yes.
theoretical perfect fit for what they need, but he's theoretical because, and I covered Melt it with the Sixers, and
No.
he's a terrific player who has not been able to stay healthy for the better part of 5 years, including
Yes. Well,
last year when he tore his ACL.
the newsier aspect of it is that he has been cleared for practice. They're reintegrating him. He was in Santa Cruz, I think yesterday, practicing with Santa Cruz. They're still ruling him out for at least the next 3 weeks, but late November, December range, seems to be
Around when he'll be
slightly
back.
targeted right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he is like, that'll be something to watch, especially because, Gary Payton's had a slow start to the season. Will Richards had an interesting start to the season. He
Big
picked
stock
Ja.
up for him.
Yeah.
Another guy in the 50s. I mean, Mike Dunleavy getting Will Richard, Quentin Post, Trace Jackson Davis all in the 50s is a gigantic home run for the organization. Even if you want to say those guys are fringe rotation guys, nobody's picking guys that are fringe rotation guys for playoff teams past 40 a lot of the time, let alone past 50. That's a pretty nice feather in Dunleavy's cap to have another guy, especially on the wing, who could step in and give them some minutes.
Well, and especially how they want to build their roster from a salary standpoint,
Yep.
because those three are on those really, miniature minimums.
Yep. Second round rookie minimums are true bargain deals if you can find guys who could play. And all those guys have been able to play different roles for them.
Yeah, and their front office loves to go up to the dollar before wherever they're restricted. Last year it was first apron, this year it's second apron, to the point that Seth Curry, another guy who's probably going to be on this team and may get a rotation crack at some point, literally cannot be on the team right now because of the dollars
Right,
and
because they don't
cents
have enough money. Yep.
Yeah.
No question. So, yeah, that is going to be an interesting question to monitor all year as to what do they try to do with the deadline. You know, we should talk about Moses Moody a little bit. He didn't have a great game today, but
Only played 10 minutes. That was a question post game. And Steve, the game went away from him. Buddy Hield hit a couple shots. He wanted to stay with him, but Moody's been pretty good. And then
Moody
10
was good
minutes
in
was a
the
choice. Yeah.
well, and Moody was good in the preseason. To your point before, right? Like Moody was good in the preseason and probably was going to be the starter until he got hurt, and then obviously that shifted things up. And I do wonder, to your point, if the spacing does become an issue. I know it's going to potentially cause other ramifications from a ego and like locker room standpoint, just because of all the things that have gone on. But at some point, do the Warriors swing back around to look at that to get another guy who's a better shooter and more of a spacer out there at the expense of what I would assume would be Jonathan Kuminga, at least as a starter, though I still think if he is the first guy off the bench, I still think he could play a very big role for
Yeah.
them. But
I think considering the dynamics at play, considering,
no, I think it would be hard, but
the
it goes.
good faith effort that both sides are making and the belief that Kaminga is making as good a faith effort as ever to
I
like
agree, but
do what's asked.
it goes
I
back to your
Yeah,
it goes back to your
no doubt.
question though before, right? Like if these
Well,
guys
maybe it's not
all
him then. Maybe it's not him the one going to the bench.
well, I
Well, I
mean
mean, the funny
that's
thing is, you could say, they bent. I shouldn't say bench Draymond, but remember
to be
Draymond
clear.
last
I was
year?
going to say just to be clear, what are you referring to? Just in case listeners and
Well,
viewers are not
Draymond
aware,
took
but
the
that's who
step.
you're talking about.
And this is why when Steve says, "Hey, he's like the permanent starter," you're like, "Okay, for now, he's turned the corner." There's been 95 of these,
Correct.
scenarios over the
He's
last
the
several
permanent
years.
starter for
Yeah,
this exact moment, is what I would say.
yeah. Um, so I'm just saying, I could see for those purposes, maybe it would be like a Draymond takes a step back, or look, Moody's the fifth starter instead of Pajemski. Maybe he gets into the mix where it's him, Pajemski, or Post. We'll see. But again, then still three non-shooters. I don't know. They would have to go through a real skid, which it's an NBA season. They're going to. It's very possible they're about to go through a skid considering their schedule. So.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, why don't you run through for people who are not aware what the upcoming schedule
Well, I'll
does
tell
look
you right
like?
now, I'm driving to Indianapolis tomorrow from Milwaukee because there's no direct flights. Don't
That's
love
true.
that.
That's
It's a
true.
very weird 2 game trip where it's just Milwaukee, Indiana, and then back to the Bay. The Warriors, like I've been on this beat now 10 years. Like if they go east, if they play these teams, it's part of a 5 game trip, 4 or 5
It's very
minimum.
rare to fly to the Midwest for 2 games and fly
As a
back.
coastal
That's
team, as a
yeah. I
West
mean,
Coast.
even really for any Western Conference team
Yeah.
to do Indiana, Milwaukee, Indiana, and back. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're Oklahoma City, maybe it's one thing, but for the most part, like you said, if you're on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast, if you're going to the other conference, you're going for a while. You're
Yeah,
not going for two
this is like
games.
the Knicks going to like Utah, Denver, and then coming back.
Yeah, it's an odd it's definitely an odd stretch, but
So
um,
after
you
that,
know,
back to back Suns Kings, which those are two opponents that right now you're probably licking your chops, but it's a back to back next week. But then at Denver, quickly home for 1 game against the Pacers, and then the 6 game trip I mentioned: Oklahoma City, San Antonio, Pelicans, Magic, Heat. So this is today started 10 of 12 on the road.
yeah, and that Denver game next Friday, I mean, my guess is we'll probably be doing this going into that game. And, look, if the Warriors want to be taken seriously in the West, they got to be 7-2, right? Which you might say, well, why are you talking about things like that on Halloween? But you can't give away games in the West. They just gave away a game they should have won
You mean
without
like
Giannis
have a
playing.
7-2 record?
Yeah, they should be 7-2 going into the Denver game. They
You're
Indiana,
saying go beat the Pacers and then win?
yeah,
Yeah,
win the three
yeah.
games. That's
Okay.
the 7. 4 + 3 is 7.
Yeah.
That is the math.
Is it? Just get
Indiana is very banged up. That's after, especially after dropping this game. Warriors can't afford to drop that game. The Suns are not good, and I want to ask you about your hometown Sacramento Kings in a
Let's
minute.
get
But
into it. Stocks
in stocks,
dwindling on the Kings right
the
now.
stock
Although
is
it's
the
like,
stock is through the damn floor on the Kings.
although
But you've gotta
did it
win
start
those.
high? I don't know. I mean, like
Well, it
it's
started higher than it's at now. But before we get to that, let's see where the Warriors are at in a week. Because if they
yeah.
go into that Denver game, because like you said, like they're 7-2 and they're going into that Denver game, they could be 8-6 in a week because Denver on the road is tough. and then at Oklahoma City, and then San Antonio on a back-to-back. I can tell you right now, a game that I would bet my life the Warriors aren't going to win is Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio the second night of a back-to-back after playing the Thunder. That is, again, the definition of a schedule loss, and I'm glad that game is not on national television because I have a feeling the Warriors will be punting that game and trying to win the game on the Friday. That would be my prediction. I don't know what your take is on that, but I'd be pretty surprised if they run all their guys through 2 games against Victor and Stephon Castle and those guys
That's
in
right.
that setting.
Yeah, I mean, the one slight saving grace for the Warriors is it's the first game after being in Chicago for San Antonio. Now they play Monday, they'll have a day off Wednesday, but you will
I'm
have
not
at least
talking. I don't really care what the Spurs could have 3 games in a row. The Warriors having to play the Thunder on the road and then going to play Victor and the young fellas on the road the next night is not a recipe for success for a
which
bunch of
game do you
old
use
guys.
Horford in? That's become a thing with them. They decided
Well, I
to
mean,
rest
look,
them against
again, I think the way to handle that, well, there's 2 ways to handle it. Uh, Neither game is a national TV game. So I think probably if you're really being cold hearted about it, you probably have everyone sit out the Thunder game and you try to win the 2 games of San Antonio, is
what
probably what you do.
by the way, why is Warriors at Thunder not a national TV
Well,
game?
first of all, why Warriors Thunder and Warriors Spurs, why are they not all national television games? I mean, Victor should be on national television every single game. He just does cartoonish things every time he's on the court. But the second Spurs game is on Prime Video, as is the Friday before when the Warriors are playing the Nuggets. But uh,
That
yeah,
that to the league is national TV. I'm surprised the one at the Thunder.
no, I'm saying those are national TV games. I'm
Yeah.
saying that the first Spurs game is not national TV and the Tuesday game is not national TV. That is like I would have thought that ABC, NBC would have
I'm about to go see what that Tuesday night national TV game
what the
is.
Tuesday. I mean, I can look it up right now. But yeah, that I don't know. That's I mean, we're getting a little bit far ahead of ourselves talking about a
Yeah.
game in 2 weeks, but that but look to your point,
Oh
that's
baby,
the
you ready?
Celtics, Sixers,
No, the
and
second one.
oh, Nuggets, Kangs. Okay. Well,
Maybe I'll
there's a
stay
lot.
home and go to Golden One Center for the
You will
NBC
not
game
be.
of the night.
Our bosses will not be allowing you to do that.
All right.
We will end in the great city of Sacramento, a place I have fond thoughts about, but also a
Yeah.
place that's the home of a truly horrendous basketball team at the moment. One that I was frankly, as I talked about on the Hoop Collective on Sunday night, angry watching just pathetically attempt to guard Austin
Ang-
Reeves
he was
on
getting
Sunday.
angry.
It was very
I was at
frustrating to
that game.
just yeah, it was not exactly a textbook example of NBA professional defensive play. Where you spent a lot of time with the Kings though, in addition to being around the Warriors, and Bulls West just went back to Chicago and got smacked by the young Bulls, who are undefeated atop the East, tied with the Sixers. Who would have guessed that?
Stock up.
Stock up for both those teams. Where are you at on the Kings? And does this seem as hopeless to you as it looks to me through 5 or 6 games?
Yes, for sure. And I mean, you mentioned the defense. One of their problems, Keegan Murray obviously is their perimeter defender. He's out right now. That'll help when he comes back. But
Prime Kawhi, I don't think could fix having DeMar
no.
DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Domantas Sabonis
Well,
all
yeah, I
trying
mean,
to
look,
play
you got no
together.
rim protection, which was obviously one of Mike Brown's things he was trying to solve for years, and you don't have length on the wing. So you're not stopping the ball, you're not defending the rim. He tried to get real creative, packing the paint, giving up threes. There were stretches where teams got really hot from three against them, and then, locally there's a fervor about like, you got to guard the 3-point line better. But he was trying to patch it together just to have the 17th best defense in the league. Um, it's a personnel problem. It isn't being helped because like Keon Ellis really, he's not really getting that much playing time. He hasn't taken the leap or been given the opportunity to take the leap that you'd hope. But part of that is because they have a bunch of like highly paid, somewhat like legendary veterans, whatever you want to call, I mean, look, DeMar DeRozan Hall of Famer. Well, I mean, I've listened to your
They have a
podcast.
lot
Dennis
of they
Schroeder
have a
Hall of Famer, right?
well,
According to
they
y'all.
have a lot of
Yeah,
guys that they're going to have a hard time
names.
sitting down.
They got a lot of
Yep,
names
got a lot of names.
that don't fit. And I mean, to be honest, like, you have a new front office coming in that's not like necessarily believing it was a fit. I think that, they entered organizationally a season knowing how, you know,
Well, can
janky
I
the puzzle is, and they're a
can
deadline
I
team.
can
That's
I
when they're interesting, the deadline.
let me get to that question. So, do we think it is more likely that the Kings realize that the best thing for them to do is to try to get one of the potential generational players in this draft? Or do the Kings go all out to try to be the 8 or 9 seed and make a panic trade? So I was talking to some executives today, and they sort of feel like a team that is going to do one of those two paths this year, and they can't necessarily do both of them. So, what do you
I
think
don't
is
I
more
in
likely?
their life cycle of like GMs and like, panicky type I guess environments, it's low right now. You have the new GM coming in who knows he's Scott Perry, he knows it's a cleanup job. And I would describe them last year and the last 2 years after making the playoffs in the more panic mode, got to figure something out. I mean,
Well, when I
obviously
say about making a panic trade,
talks for Levine.
I don't think it's Scott Perry that is going
Well,
to be the
but
one
but but I
decreeing
don't.
making the
Yeah,
panic trade.
I
That's why I was asking.
I just when I'm talking about the arc, I think Vivek is at a point this season where he's not like there's not some playoff mandate. It felt very playoff mandatey entering last season. You get a coach firing, you get a GM firing, you get wacky trades, you get yourself into this situation, you back yourself into handcuffs in a corner through that. But I do think being around them organization,
So the answer is
I think they're going
we
to be.
expect them to lean
Yeah,
into being bad rather
yes.
than trying to get good.
I would predict them as sellers at the deadline, although the contracts are tough to sell. And I would, they would have a real
Well,
tough
listen,
time like sitting the vet.
as long as they don't make a panic trade, they're going to be bad.
Yeah,
So they're going
I
to
don't
have a
think.
shot to end up with and look, I'm not saying they end up with the number 1 pick in the draft necessarily, though they're going to be bad enough to be in the mix. But as long as they don't make some foolhardy trade to try to be in the play in, I think they're going to end up with a pretty decent chance to have a good draft pick because I do not really see a path to this team being
No,
competitive
I mean, look who
with
who
where
are
they're
they
at.
after this summer?
You mean next summer?
No, who were they after this past summer? I think it's informative.
Oh, you're talking about go back to our favorite topic, Jonathan
Yes,
Kuminga again. Yeah.
that is the type of guy I could see them go get it. Trying to go get. I could see them trying to revisit that again. Not to go back to our earlier. I'm not sure that they can get that done, but like it seems like Scott Perry will want to go get a younger guy
Well,
to
would
build within the
I mean it
future.
would be hard to do Keegan Murray for Jonathan Kuminga, but would Scott Perry do that now?
Oh, my guess would be no, but you mentioned it. The poison pill aspect of that makes it
Might be a
extremely.
next summer move rather than a now move, but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would be a trade that would I think it would make sense for Golden State, but
But I guess to my point, like they're not they're they're in a kind of quiet, soft rebuild behind the scenes. It very much seems and
well,
appears.
and that's going to be I think one of the real interesting questions of the next 3 months is are you right? And I'm not saying that to like poke at you and say that you're not right, but like I think people around the league will be watching the Kings to see will they be will they be prudent about this or
Yeah,
will there be a oh no, what are we going to do? We got to try to make the playoffs. Let's panic and do something rash move.
I don't feel the level of like illusions that they should be a playoff team that I did the last
Well, and
couple.
that's why I ask because you're around them as much as
Yeah.
anybody. And I listen to be crystal clear. That's exactly what they should do. Like they should just look at this and say, yeah, this isn't going to work. Keegan Murray's a good player. I think the contract they just signed him to is fine. He'll be there for much of his prime. And if they can just mind their P's and Q's and take their lumps this year and get one of these guys that's
And
in
then
a
draft
absolutely
low.
loaded draft, then all of a sudden, it might not have to be a forever in the wilderness type thing if you maneuver it right. But Sabonis has not looked good. I think that contract could end up aging quite badly. And, we saw DeMar and Zach not work in Chicago in the weaker conference. And that was while they were both younger. It is not looking great for that working in a very deep Western Conference. But it's going to be an interesting thing to follow all season, along with everything else that's happening out in your neck of the woods. Been a busy time in the Pacific Northwest the past couple weeks on a lot of fronts.
I like the Kings segment. We should make it a weekly at the end.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if the Kings are going to merit a weekly discussion, but it was an interesting
January, February. They might.
Well, again, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they'll prove us wrong and they'll go on a big winning streak. But all right, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Stock Report. Thank you for working late, Slater, at Fiserv Forum after the Bucks beat the Warriors on Thursday night. And we'll probably talk to you guys again a week from now, heading into what should be a pretty fascinating rematch in Denver against the Nuggets. And we'll see if Golden State can do what they should over the next week. And as I've demanded them that they do, be 7-2 going into that game against Jokic and co. So,
all right.
Safe travel, Slater. Safe drive down 94 tomorrow. And we'll talk to you all next week. NBA on ESPN.